Finding random tech gadgets you didn't expect to find is always a great experience. And in this case, we have Apple's 2016 MacBook Pro. Now the color of this MacBook is specifically space gray, and it's a 13-inch MacBook. And today we're gonna see if this is still something that's worth the buy. Now this specific MacBook Pro is a 13-inch that has a touch bar, and I think the touch bar is a great addition to the MacBook altogether. And it's crazy because a lot of MacBooks even today don't include the touch bar for some reason. The fact that this 2016 one does is definitely something that we have to add to the want to buy. This MacBook Pro has a Core i5 2.9 processor, and compared to the M2 processors that they have about now, this MacBook may not be up to performance compared to the new MacBooks, but what can it really do? I've thoroughly tested this MacBook in so many different ways, including just editing, stress testing it, and so far it's done amazing in terms of just performance. But one of the biggest issues that these MacBooks have, especially in these older editions, is that it overheats. And when I mean overheating, I mean this MacBook will literally turn into an oven. When it gets under stress, it'll overheat, and of course overheating will slow it down altogether. And I think overall it is such a bad thing that it does this in the first place. I wish that they had better cooling for these type of MacBooks, but other than that, I think this MacBook can definitely do a lot. Now this MacBook does include 8 gigabytes of RAM. Comparing it to the newer MacBooks, 8 gigabytes of RAM isn't the greatest, especially if you're trying to get a lot done and multitask, but it can definitely get the job done in terms of just doing simple things and not multitasking so much. You can still do a little bit of multitasking, but just not as in depth as you could with other MacBooks. And of course, the 512 gigabytes of SSD storage, I think is definitely pretty good for a 2016 MacBook Pro. Once it reaches about 300 gigabytes full, it significantly slows down in these MacBooks. You definitely cannot utilize all of the storage in these MacBooks, and it just won't be usable anymore pretty much. Now, one of the cooler features that I did notice about this MacBook that it has is Touch ID. And as this may not be super cool nowadays because I know the newer MacBooks even have Face ID, if we're comparing it, I'm really not a huge fan of Face ID, but Touch ID has always been something that I've been a fan of, and having it for my MacBook is definitely a plus for me. Along with the touch bar, I think it's super nice, and everything about the touch bar and Touch ID just looks so right, and it looks like everything on this MacBook is where it's supposed to be. Now, I do want to note that this MacBook Pro has 550 integrated Intel graphics, so if you're looking for something to game on or to do extensive After Effects or extensive editing, you probably don't want to use this, because when it comes to getting those graphics and getting processing done at a higher scale, this won't be able to get the job done. But now this MacBook is currently running on the OS Monterey Edition version 12.5.1. So what that kind of means is that a lot of things in the App Store that are a lot more updated, you really can't install. It won't allow you to install a lot of newer things in the App Store because you don't have the newest edition of Mac OS, but you can still do a lot with this Mac OS, don't get me wrong. Now, the speaker system on this MacBook is something that I definitely look forward to talking about. I think that this MacBook has one of the better speakers, in my opinion, because of how they're placed. And I think in the newer MacBooks, they're also placed pretty well, but I think this year, specifically for this version of Mac, they really started to perfect the way that they place their speakers and produce their speakers to make them sound really full and just have that overall surround sounds. I think they really did that with this year. Here's what they sound like overall.
Size is not merely seeing reality.
I wouldn't at all say that they're the best speaker that I've ever heard on a Mac. So that's what I would say about the speakers. I think the speakers are definitely something that I would say is a plus on this Mac. It's something that they definitely perfected to this year. Now, in terms of the Retina display for this MacBook, it has a 2560 x 1600 Retina display. I cannot lie, it's one of the most beautiful displays that I've seen, especially coming up on the 2016 year. 2015 to 2016 years were, I think, the biggest changes happened personally. And this looks beautiful. The coloring is super nice. You have the ability to also change and adjust the coloring. So if you're not interested in the normal coloring like me, I actually have it on a totally different setting. It gives it a little more of a mature look in terms of coloring, which I like. And moving on to one of the most important things I think in a MacBook is the battery life. How long is this gonna last being off of a charger? Now, I'm gonna be completely honest, when it comes to the battery on this MacBook, it's not the best. Now with this lithium battery on this 2016 MacBook, it definitely is not the greatest. It does not last long, and the battery does get bad very quickly. And what I mean by that is that over time, your battery will degrade and it won't be the greatest from the first initial launch. Every single time that you charge it, it'll get worse and degrade over time. But I think these older MacBooks definitely still and have always had a problem with the degrading on the batteries just not being the greatest. You'll definitely need to be putting this on the charger every 3 hours, maybe 5 to 6 hours of use if you're not doing something that's strenuous or not doing anything that is stressful for your computer. If you're idle, it could probably last up to 7 to 8 hours. Even then, that's a stretch. You'll probably have to put it back on the charger pretty quickly. I guess it just depends on what your preferences are and what you're willing to give up for such a low price. But overall, what would I say about this MacBook? I think that the 2016 MacBook Pro is definitely something that you need. If you're looking for something that's cheap, under $1,000, I think for the $700 range, to have a touch bar, to have a finger touch ID, to have this beautiful Retina display, to also have such a smooth interface along with nice sounding speakers, a decent battery as well. I think overall this MacBook is definitely a steal on so many different levels. I think if you're looking for something to even today, I think the 2016 one can definitely still perform and do the job for you. I appreciate you guys watching to the end of this video. That's it for me, and that's the review for today. Make sure to stay salty, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.